Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our session on how to adapt your e-commerce strategy for AI search. I'm Nicola, co-founder of CMO Circle, and this is such a hot topic that we even have a separate sub-channel in CMO Circle. I'm pretty lacking in knowledge here, so I'm delighted to welcome Sam Hurley, the co-founder of MD and of Novos, and Dan Cartland, his director of delivery, to share all of their insights as to how to nail your AI search strategy. Between Dan and Sam, we've got over 20 years experience in SEO, both agency and client side, and they've worked with over 250 e-commerce brands, including Osprey, Tala, Lush, and Not on the High Street. Outside of Novos, Sam is a father of a 3-year-old and a big supporter of Arsenal, whereas Dan is a QPR fan and plays rugby for Marlow. So as I mentioned, please do introduce yourselves in chat. We'd love to hear what steps you've taken to optimize your brand for AI search. Hopefully you're doing better than me. And without further ado, Sam and Dan, over to you. I need to learn a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, cool. Hopefully you can see our screen okay. Okay, so you kicking off with this one, Dan?
Yeah, I will. So first to define sort of what we're talking about when we talk about AI search. So when we're using it today, it's going to focus on like everything, all aspects of large language models. So it's like ChatGPT, Google AI overviews, Google AI mode. We're grouping it all under one term, which is AI search. The biggest priority of these at the moment still remains Google AI overviews, Google AI mode. This is simply because despite all the hype that ChatGPT has, Google still has by far and away the biggest market share, and that's like piggybacking off the traditional search. That is obviously still very, very large. You may have heard on LinkedIn, GEO being banded around. We tend not to use this because really no brand has really good presence in AI search and LLMs without having good SEO. And although there are definitely like different ways of going about them, there's still the same general approach. So you wouldn't do something like purely for AI search that wouldn't also benefit SEO. It's still the same broad approach of tech, content, and links, just viewed through a slightly different lens. So if you're investing in SEO, you're also investing in AI search to some extent. At the moment, it's not a separate channel as maybe sort of paid and organic might be at the moment.
Cool. And then just in terms of like an exact summary of what you can expect coming up, some of the things you need, key takeaways. So search behavior is changing. So this is a big thing in terms of like how much longer tail searches are becoming. With this, metrics are changing, so a lot less focused on clicks and revenue directed to website, a lot more how your brand is performing within LLMs and within Google, so within the platforms themselves. Similar to how like the organic social media platforms have been doing over the last few years. Just to re-emphasize what Dan's mentioned, because it's very, very important. A lot of like trying to debunk a lot of the nonsense that you see on LinkedIn. Like if we just did LinkedIn posts saying SEO's geo is basically the same as SEO, not going to get much engagement likes. But if you do something polarizing like SEO's dead, industry's changed, you're obviously going to get a lot more engagement. Currently, the narrative within the SEO industry is like all of this is basically the same strategies, tech, content, and offsite link building. There's just a slight lens, slightly different. If anything, we're doing more work than we did previously. It's just a different lens to view our tactics that we've been doing in the past. An example of this is content depth. So historically, now with AI search now, you just got to go into way more depth around specific areas of your content, and then aligning that much more with your personas. Where e-com specialists, so a lot of what we talk about here is very, very e-com led. You can broadly cover the same kind of thinking and principles for like a non-e-commerce website. But when you see terms like PDPs, that's product detail pages, and product listing pages, which is more like the comparison side of things. Brand, so brand plays a big part in the general rankings within LLMs, as well as the sentiment of the brand. And when we come to offsite PR now, like the way we view it is brand building, link building, and then now within the LLM world is citation building. So we'll go into all of these in a lot more detail coming up, but this is kind of just plant the seed in your brain as we're going through it. So why is it important? So this is the search behavior that I mentioned. So a lot of questions that our clients ask is basically like, GPT's been around for 2 to 3 years now. Why is it only now that we're talking about it as like a commercial channel or trying to get your brand visible on GPT? And the reason is like it's taken this length of time to influence the way that people search. So when GPT came out, it's taken roughly about 2 to 3 years for people to search way longer, like this more like chat search. So the stat here is like words with 7 to 8 keywords with 7 to 8 words in there. Those are up like double. Google last year reported that they've seen a 1.5x growth in terms with 5 words plus. So this is essentially like long tail SEO. Historically, we would have viewed long tail as 3 to 4 words, but now with this chat experience and the way people are used to using GPT and getting something very, 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 very specific around their needs, they then started moving this into Google and started searching way longer tail within Google. Traditional Google couldn't satisfy this, hence why they launched AI mode and these AI overviews so that they were able to give a summary of the traditional search and serve it directly within Google to answer all of these really, really, really long tail search terms. And this is just a very quick example of what this would be. So on the left, traditional search. Back then, we'd have called this long tail. So it's best running shoes for wide feet. That is very, very specific compared to what we're used to. But then when you go into the AI world, people are way more educated through social media now. So that naturally they're going to be pulling out attributes that they've been learned about, put that in their search terms. And within here, we've highlighted about 5 or 6 needs for that individual in their search term. So previously, that's all you'd have wanted to know was, yeah, they need running shoes, they got wide feet. But now we're a lot more aware of what their specific needs are, hence why like they're looking for things like cushion shoes. For women, wide feet, they do 10K park runs, so that gives us a lot of insight then into like the level of their running that they're in, like completely different level to somebody who might be looking for a shoe for ultramarathon running or even just getting started with running. It's a lot more specific, and therefore your content needs to adapt towards these way more specific search terms as well. The second big trend to be aware of, this has been in Google for a while. So if you've been in the industry or been around as long as I have, back in 2015, Google did a big thing where they brought in all of the comparisons within Google. So back then that was called feature snippets. The threat to Google back then was big brands that dominated their industries. They were brand powers in themselves and essentially search engines themselves. So think things like Rightmove, Total Jobs, Expedia, etc. People would then bypass Google, go straight to Expedia and get a comparison shopping experience on Expedia. But then Google pulled all of this comparison stuff into Google search. So it gave a better experience because you can compare across all the different travel sites, not just Expedia. And then that killed Expedia's share price overnight. So that happened in 2015. This is a general trend that Google's been trying to do for a very long time. They want to keep more and more people within the platform. The more people that are in the platform, the more you can monetize it. And this LLM search has just allowed them to do that on a new level. So they're just keeping so many people within Google. In the e-com world, they essentially want to be that PLP experience. So you shop, you validate all the way from the top of the funnel, all the way to the bottom, all within LLMs. And then when you're ready to buy, then they click off and you land on the PDP. So you get less clicks overall, but the logic being they're higher quality clicks because they've been completely validated and they're ready to buy, essentially. So then this completely transforms measurement. So obviously there's no point doing all of this if you can't actually measure it. So when it comes to traditional SEO, the primary metric was always sessions, clicks, revenue. When it comes to AI search, it's a lot more impression share and brand visibility within the LLMs. So it's certain topics, I'll go into this in a lot more detail coming up, but you define certain topics that you want to be appearing for. And the goal then is to get your impression share and your brand visibility as high as possible within all of these citations across all of the LLM platforms. Secondary metrics in traditional search would have been keyword growth, search visibility, In the AI platforms, it's a lot more specific around topic visibility, LLM visibility. But the key part is the tertiaries, which we call these tertiary metrics to our clients, which is the outputs they get from us on a monthly basis. It still ultimately boils down to technical tickets, content briefs, and offsite link building. And then with data sources, you've obviously got GA, Search Console, SEMrush, etc. But all of the LLM stuff is just so new. They essentially haven't created an equivalent of Google Search Console. So we have to rely way more heavily on these third-party tools, which are still pretty expensive, but we're leaning heavily on them to understand the visibility of our brands within all of these platforms. Mention the tools. So I know these kind of do quite a lot of rounds in the CMO communities and stuff, but we've tested a lot of them. And if we exclude the enterprise level tools, like these are our most go-to recommendations. So number one is Profound, by far way ahead of all the other competitors in the market. Putting a lot of research in here. Sam Altman's brother is one of the big investors in the platform, which kind of tells you a lot. But with that comes a very high cost. So it comes out about $500 to $600 per month. And the more and more prompts you put in here, the more expensive it gets. Next tier down then is Peak AI. So not quite as expensive, but then it lacks some of the features, but still very good option for that mid tier. And then you got the SEMrush AI then, which very average, but it comes with a much lower cost. So that's about $99. So if you have anything set up, that could be one to start with, just to get an idea of how you're performing at a very basic level. And then you can look to scale up from there.
Cool. Sorry, quick question.
Yes.
As you mentioned, there are so many tools out there at the moment, and everyone's branding themselves as the best SEO tool for AEO. Are there any that you feel comfortable saying avoid, or any important things we should be looking for when evaluating tools?
So I think anytime somebody says that they're trying to be to do the doing as well, that's always a red flag for us, because like SEO tools have tried to do in the past, where they essentially they give you the tool and then they essentially try to do the agency work or what the in-house person would do. That's obviously a big red flag for us, because you just like, this stuff is way more complex than just giving you an output. Like, these are marketing channels at the end of the day, so you need to think about your target audience, your personas, what your brand represents. Is so much more than just here's a content brief and it's just an output. Like that can work if you've got an SEO in-house and the SEO is there to like oversee and dictate whether that's good quality. But a lot of tools are trying to do the entire thing, and yeah, I would just definitely avoid those kind of tools.
I'd probably say sort of taper expectations as well, particularly if you're familiar with SEO tools. Like, you're not going to get the same granularity of detail around how many people are searching for a particular keyword, simply because it is such longer tail that information just doesn't really exist, or if it does exist, it's aggregated based on sort of similar topics versus like actual keyword volume, which you have in SEO. Similarly, we talk about this, like it becomes more about visibility versus ranking, because every one of us here could search the same thing in an LLM and get a different answer with different like brands mentioned. And so it becomes more about like how many times is your brand mentioned within that 20 versus in Google, where it's like you can feasibly, most of us will see the same brands ranking in position 1 and 2 and 3. So just, I guess, yeah, the expectation and what you should be getting, it should be slightly different.
Thank you.
As Sam mentioned, yeah, the impact of sort of AI search at the moment is in its relative infancy. So we're starting to see an impact. The US in particular is slightly further ahead. Things like AI mode have been rolled out much sooner than in the UK. But we're starting to see performance impact. Tends to be fewer clicks to the website, particularly for top of funnel searches. So you might see blog posts, informational pages being impacted a lot more. But also, we're starting to see strategies start to adapt as well. Things like product pages becoming more important, whereas category pages or PLPs have tended to get the lion's share of traffic and revenue in traditional Google search, because AI can sort of bypass those aggregate pages and get information direct, more specific information direct from product pages. starting to see those come up more as well. So at the moment, it's not a case of completely ignore what you've been doing, but it's sort of getting to that point where we want to start preparing, start implementing things which are more through the lens of AI search. But it's not yet time to sort of forget everything that we're doing on PLPs because they are still generating traffic and revenue.
So this is a teaser for like what's coming up, but this is essentially kind of like what the tools will give you. So like you can, at a broad level, you define the topics that you want to be present for. And then within this, you can either do, or the tools can auto define prompts for you. It's better if you, typically what we do is we start with the automated ones, see where the state of play is. And then we work with the client then to define the prompts a bit more detail, which again, we'll have coming up. Essentially what the tools will do then is put these prompts into GPT and all of the other platforms. I think they do it 3 or 4 times a day, consistently over time, and then they export all the results, and then it kind of just exports your brand names and your competitor brand names, and then creates this ranking system over time. So essentially what you're looking at here is one for luxury sofas, and you can't really completely see the logos, but the black one is John Lewis. So you see like John Lewis is ranking first for about 7 of these terms and second for the other ones. So just as you expect, John Lewis dominates traditional. They're doing pretty well in AI search as well. And then here's another one for one of our clients, Osprey. It pulls out then that it shows that they're the leader for a lot of these categories, apart from 3. So then that's part of our upcoming strategy, is how do we get them to be a leader in these other topics as well. Dan touched on this earlier, but when it comes to volume, this is going to be a big thing, because historically, so when Google, back in 2013, Google released a huge update, which was Hummingbird, and that was an update that better understood human language. So ever since then, Longtail was created, which is what a traditional SEO strategy would revolve around, which is how-tos, what is, like all of those standard longer tail terms. Even since that was released, like over 10 years ago, our SEO tools aren't brilliant at getting the long tail search volume for those long tail terms. So like we would see a term would have 100 search volume. We write a blog about it, you rank number 1, and in truth, you potentially get like thousands of traffic per month. So that was just for a small sample of long tail over a 10-year period. And like Dan mentioned previously, like these LLM search terms, again, even longer. So can't really see any of the tools being able to give us concrete volume behind all of these long tail. So the narrative we're using with clients is a lot less data led and a lot more data informed. So using some of the traditional data that we've got to prioritize all of the massive amount of topics that a client could rank for, and then using that to inform our strategy, and then working a lot closer with brand teams then and their personas to match up what the brand actually wants to be visible for. And then this is like an example of what we mean by this, because one of the tools, Profound, that we're using, they've recently launched their equivalent of a search keyword research tool. And you can see the volume comparison here that's giving out is Google is significantly higher than all 3 of these. And then you can see GPT is actually about 28,000 searches for sofas. But as soon as you go into the category below sofas, it's almost non-existent. It's actually below Bing. You just know that that's not true, because the amount of times that sofas could be mentioned across all of these long tail searches en masse across GPT is obviously going to be higher than that, but our tools just can't keep up with the demand and the mass amount of prompts that are going in there. So we do very much have to take the volumes as like a pinch of salt. Cool. In terms of like what success looks like, so we've had our clients in here since the start of the year. So this is an example for Osprey. So back in March, they were ranking visibility about like 35%, and we've taken that up to just over 60%. So we've got framework coming up of like how like that gives an insight of what we've applied to the site. But this is like the success of this. So we set them up in Profound start of the year. That allowed us to get visibility insights into like what the LLMs perceive them to be good at and not good at, and then broadly speaking, like our overall SEO strategy didn't really change that much, but it was just an extra layer of data that we could apply and rank check against in the LLMs. So basically, like, this is another example of what it gives you is Osprey and this visibility across all of the major LLMs. You've got Grok, Meta AI in there. So again, if one of these was like a key LLM that they know their personas use, we can double down on that. But broadly speaking, it falls back to Google AI modes, Google AI overviews, and ChatGPT.
Sam, just a quick question. Where's the visibility chart for? Oh, you've answered that one. Thank you. So it's all from Profound.
Yeah, all from Profound. So what you do is, like, at the start, you define the topics that you want to be visible for, and then it gives you, once the data aggregates, it gives you that score then of 35%, and then that allows you to see where the gaps are to close them. So for Osprey, here's an example of like the broad topics. So you can see under here we've got children's carriers. So there's like 10 prompts within there. On the left-hand side is where they were scored in March, and then where they're scoring now in September. So you can see like there's some in there where they were already doing pretty well, but now they are broadly first for most of them. Children's carriers in particular, and then travel backpacks, like the visibility's increased massively for each of those categories. And then the most important part is when you benchmark versus your competitors. So we put these domains have been in there since the start. So it's North Face, Patagonia, REI. When we first started doing this, our visibility was more or less the same as all of these competitors, which you can see like all the way on the left of the graph. Investing in this over time, just like SEO, has put them way above the competitors. So it's going to take a while for the competitors to actually start catching up with Osprey. And if they keep investing, then yeah, we just keep going ahead of them essentially.
In terms of what not to do, there are a few things going around that are, like, seem to be working at the moment and are being recommended, but like in our professional opinion, we wouldn't go after, particularly as a long-term strategy. So like the question is, like, if you'd want to be ranking in LLMs for like what's the best furniture shop, for example. Common things that are being recommended are: number one, create a blog post on your own website with the title "Who's the best furniture shop?" And list your brand as number one. This is something that a lot of SEO agencies are doing. Example here, just randomly took this, and yeah, they list themselves as number one, and then every competitor is number two, three, four, and it seems to be working at the moment. I think like this is quite obviously like not a particularly good look for a brand. Like anyone doing any level of further insight can see that is like obviously not a trustworthy source for the best of the topic. It also means you do have to list your competitors on your own website, which you may or may not want to do. And broadly, we'd spend the time and effort actively building your brand and getting across the USPs of the brand across your site, across external marketing channels, versus sort of doing a cheap sort of hack to win in the short term, which can be adapted and should be pretty easy to adapt for AI search. In any case. The other area, which maybe is slightly more nuanced, is Reddit and social platforms, currently being highly cited, particularly in things like ChatGPT. It's tempting because they are so highly cited to go after them and sort of manipulate threads to get your brand and positive sentiment across there. It's not something we're recommending. The reason being is this sort of active manipulation is not good for a brand, particularly on Reddit. There's been loads of examples where brands have sort of been caught out, sort of trying to manipulate their own sentiment, and it makes you look worse than if you just either answered like formally from the company and said like, this is our take on it, this is our approach, or just built your brand and made sure that your product was good, your service was good, and so people were naturally had good things to say about it online. So our approach is it's brand damaging, it's not brand building, and actually you should be looking to build your brand for long-term AI success. I think Google in the past has had previous for actually actively sort of punishing brands for doing stuff like this. Link building is a good example. It used to be the case that you'd just buy loads of links and you'd rank really well for loads of high volume keywords. And then Google released their Penguin algorithm, and everyone that was doing that got annihilated. So I think like not only is it like a sort of cheap trick, it could actually be damaging in the in the long run as well. So our focus is much more on sustainable practices that are going to win not only in AI search, but for your brand in general.
Dan, while we're on the topic of YouTube, there's a question from Stephanie on what's your view on channels like Wikipedia and YouTube, which also seem to rank highly as well.
Yeah, so Wikipedia is kind of the same. Like you can seed it with relevant information, but I wouldn't actually try to sort of manipulate it in any way. YouTube is a bit more interesting because it's more of an own channel. So if you've got people expect to see content that you've created on YouTube, whereas on Wikipedia they expect to see a third party sort of factual information about your brand. So yeah, the way we look at it is like anything earned, 100% go after. This is sort of the basis of marketing. Your own channels, again, like ensure you've got consistent messaging, consistent information about your brand USPs. Whereas things like social, we at the moment would not actively try to manipulate or sort of seed information on, just because it is easy to manipulate. If you get caught manipulating it, you look worse than if you hadn't done it at all. And also it's rife for future changes which could actively harm your brand as well.
Great, thanks, Dan.
I think just to quickly highlight in this slide too is one of the really good things that the tool gives us is once you define the topics, is that each of the LLMs have a general criteria of which sites they deem as trustworthy. So then that helps us to create a prospecting list for our PR team to go out and get coverage on those trustworthy sites too. So like right now they kind of overlap, but there's like small nuances where you see like maybe Perplexity might prefer a certain other site over GPT. I think off the top of my head, I think Forbes is particularly prevalent across GPT, but less on Perplexity. But I think the key point here is like they've already got a certain criteria which is slightly different. So you can definitely see over time as they mature, you can see a scenario where Perplexity's got a different source of trustworthy sites compared to GPT, or maybe even if they have some kind of commercial agreement between each other, between themselves and the publishers, then that might become a bit more of a trustworthy source. But that's a particular area of the tools that our digital PR team get a lot of value out of.
And this is an example of that at play. So using the same example, best furniture shops in the UK, we can see that like a number of brands are being returned. When you click through on the Heels example, the reason they're being returned is because they are cited in a relevant and sort of renowned external publication. So this is a sort of way that you can influence via more long-term brand building. You're reaching customers via means that they might be searching in directly. They're trusted, they're relevant, and they're not going to harm your brand in the long run. If anything, it is positive for your brand. So you can influence it that way by knowing what type of publications, and not even just what type of publications, what actual publications are being used as citations in particular topic areas, and then going after them via PR, offsite SEO, digital PR.
This is another reason why we keep highlighting that if you're investing in SEO, then you're basically investing in AI search as well, because thought process has always been with SEO and Google is like you can say as much as you want on site, but as soon as somebody says it off site, and essentially Google always sees that as like a vote and an endorsement. So it's a very similar thing here with the LLM platforms. Like you can put on your site and say this boot is really good for 10K runs and wide feet. But if an external, relevant, trusted publication says that about you, that's going to be 10 times more powerful than whatever you put on your own website. Okay, cool. So in terms of adapting, so this is basically like all of the stuff that we'd be doing for our clients right now. So we create this framework mainly because there's just so much happening, so much change. So then this helps to like structure things across certain areas, particularly for when we're talking to clients. So it just doesn't feel like a complete download of everything that's happening, but then it also helps to then align and structure our strategies once they actually do become clients from the sales process. So situation relevance, that's the part that we mentioned about long tail terms becoming way longer, way more situational about my specific needs. Expert led and experience led. The aim of this is to cut through the noise that's going to come from like just an increase in the number of brands using AI content across their sites. Enriched product data, that is around the trend you mentioned previously about if Google and these LLMs want to become the shopping experience, the PLP, so for e-com brands, essentially the clicks will then eventually come down to the PDPs. Whatever your site is, it's typically going to be the deepest pages are the ones that people actually transact on. So those are the ones to focus on there. And then finally, distinct brand value. So this is the part where if LLMs and Google are controlling all of this more, then as a brand, how do you get your voice and your authenticity and your USPs across when that experience has been taken off of your website? So that's what that part focuses on. So one of the learnings for one of our clients, so this was one of our travel clients, Omio. So this was, we did a bunch of offsite work for them around this concept, which is sunniest capital cities in the world. So leading up to the summer and with the heat waves and stuff. So did a lot of data analysis, and we got them a lot of coverage. Created this AI, it generated this AI overview within Google. But then what you'll see from the screenshot, or if you do it on your own Googles, this essentially will come up and it doesn't mention our client Omio anywhere. So in the sources on the right, each of those publications are coverage and links that we built. And within that coverage, it references Omio did this big study, found this, etc., etc. But it wasn't mentioned at all within the AI overviews. So this is where we focus purely on onsite. But then what we want to do with clients is the onsite and the offsite lined up, because if they'd just had a very simple page which said, these are all of our findings, this is what we found, then it's highly likely that they would then be in the overview as well. So this is essentially like the goal of AI search, which is to get mentioned as much as possible across the actual overview and then within all of the sources as well. So in this example, it's like within timeout. I think that's Metro. So you want to be referenced within there and in the overviews too. And this is essentially what it is. So as an example, Art Deco, if that's the overall topic that your brand wants to be known for, if you're a relative authority in the site, then you could be creating content on your page about Art Deco versus some of these other trends, which is fine. So then if you are authority within interior designs or within this topic, you could potentially then get in the AI overviews this way if your content's good. That's one mention. But then what we also want to be doing is the offsite PR link building side of things. So that's where in this topic, El Deco is particularly authoritative. So we want to get our clients coverage on El Deco as well, talking about Art Deco. So if any AI overviews are triggered around the term of Art Deco, which is due to be trending in Q4, then in the overview, it'll be our client. And then all of the trusted sources that Google has referenced to, within there, our client will be referenced as well. So it's like a full shebang of everything. Like we've got the authority and the thought leadership on our site, and we've also got the coverage for the client. So again, as much mentions as possible, and then that's a way that you become like a true authority for these topics. And then, yeah, just backs this up kind of thing. It's like, yeah, this is from the Pinterest autumn report, so it's focusing on the trends and the upcoming demand. The left is all of the publications that have got really high authority within this topic. And then the people also ask is a good way to source ideas for some on-site copy as well. Mentioned this previously, but this is where it's kind of brand building, link building, and then citation building. So this is the term that LLMs use. So citations, because you want to get cited in all of the sources that I've just mentioned there. And it's also citations because mentions are completely fine and relevant now. So historically, as an SEO, you do all of the PR work to get links. You can't control it, but once the publication went live, there wouldn't be a link in there, and then we'd feel like all of our work was completely worthless. But over time, Google said mentions are okay. but now what's happened with LLMs is mentions are like actually completely fine. So you see this example, I think this might be Osprey. So it's like, these are what the LLMs deem to be super authoritative pages that have informed and dictated the knowledge that the LLMs have. And then you can see in the other column is Osprey's already naturally been mentioned across all of these -3. And that's the part of having a genuinely very good product and a really high authority brand like Osprey, because then you naturally get into these LLMs overviews because you're naturally featured in all of these listicles. Cool.
On to situational search, and Sam mentioned this previously, but I think AI search is going to become much more about providing specific context to different personas. This is quite interesting how like AI search is similar to SEO but through a different lens, because for a long time understanding the customer journey has been like spoken about in SEO and has been important in SEO to inform what you put on site. I think the difference is with traditional SEO, it was hard to actually do that because it always came back to the same keywords. So different personas would actually end up searching the same generic keyword. And so it was hard to know or hard to understand what you should actually put on your site, because they basically reverted back to the same actual customer journey in terms of which keyword the pages were targeting. Because AI search has much more a nuanced understanding of what an individual is looking for, and because different personas are searching in much like more specific and longer ways, we then want the on-site content to reflect and target those different personas. So if you go to the next slide, like an example of like a few different personas, I think every brand has them, but I think like when you actually ask how is your current SEO strategy adapting to these, I think it tends to sort of get stuck there. Whereas because you can then understand the different situations that these different personas are looking for, you can reflect that on site in a much more detailed way. So this goes not just for like the different personas with different interests, but also goes for different levels of experience within those personas. So somebody who's new to sort of, if you go to the next slide, someone who's new to sort of the gym might be looking for something different type of information to somebody who is very experienced in the gym. They're looking for different elements, and that's why the level of depth and information on your site needs to go much further and becomes pushed much more towards product pages versus category pages, which allow the customer to go on, see all products and make the decision themselves. Because AI search can return information direct from PDPs, the onus is on us to reflect the different type of situational content via product pages. An example of sites that do this really well are trainer companies. So they've sort of got a head start on this. So Hoka are a really good example. The sort of information they give on their product pages is like, what type of shoe is this best for? Is it road running? Is it trail running? What are the different features? Comparison content. So actually giving an opinion and making a decision for your customers, like this shoe is better than this shoe for particular things. Brands are often very hesitant to sort of give an opinion, when actually it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's good for different people in different situations. Again, things like stability and cushioning. Runners, if you're a beginner runner, you want this level of information and you want to know, like, based on their experience, what type of shoe should they get. And if you're an experienced runner, you want all the details to make a decision for yourself based on the type of shoe that you know works for you and the race you're going for, and whether it's a training run or you're going for a PB. And so including this type of information on your site, on product pages, becomes much, much more important, and aligning with the different situations that your customers are experiencing to reach your product.
Okay, cool. Next section, expertise and experience. Same with when the first part I mentioned, around like tech, content, and offsite. So we talk about offsite and content quite a lot, But when it comes to tech, key thing to know is LLMs just are nowhere near as advanced as Google. So it's kind of Google technical understanding from about 5 years ago. So the one big thing within this is JavaScript. So just quickly give you an example of this. So this is one of our clients. Once we got them into the tool, like we could see that their competitor buyer guide was performing way better than theirs. So it was within the last 2 months, it had already been cited over 20 times within AI search. So then once we dig into this to understand why, basically found that a large amount of our client's buyer guide was focused on JavaScript. So this is something that Google has been able to read over the last few years. It's way more resource heavy for it, but it can actually read JavaScript, whereas GPT just cannot do that. So if you've got any kind of like super advanced website that's got headless setup, heavy on JavaScript, that's not server-side rendered, then essentially the LLMs just can't read it. So that's like a fundamental tech problem that needs to be fixed, because you could have the best content in the world and all of the coverage, but if the LLMs can't actually read it, then yeah, you wouldn't get cited.
You can also review pages on the site in the same way that AI mode is doing. So this is a query fan out mapping. So it looks at, based on the topic of the page, what are follow-up questions that a customer might ask. And then you can make a decision whether to include information that answers those questions on those pages. So it's kind of like using AI and the way AI is working to help to establish the content that you present on site as well. And not all of these will be relevant, but it gives a good way of sort of figuring out like what the next questions that I might want to be asking from a customer's perspective.
This is just the point on the start, is like this kind of stuff really gets your expertise across. So it's almost like a checklist of answer these questions because the customers want to know about it, and then you get your expertise across on site. And then when it comes to on-site, using AI content on your site. So this is another part that clients ask us a lot. So kind of broken it down into different parts of the site. So if you're an e-com brand, the PLPs, typically this involves indexing your filters. So like if you got a sofa brand and you click red, that creates a page which is red sofas. If you don't have them indexed, Google can't see that page. So a lot of tactics with SEOs that they do is to get that index. So essentially creates mass pages. So then you've got a red sofa page, orange sofa page. So then you've got a lot of highly commercial SEO landing pages created very quickly. That's been around for a very, very long time, but there's a resurgence of tools that are calling this like AI generation, etc. But broadly speaking, it's the exact same thing. If you're going to do it, yeah, you need an SEO there to essentially, like, it's quite easy to get pages indexed and get Google to read them. The hard part is to get them to stop reading it, because it can just cause a mass amount of bloat and just, yeah, significantly impact the overall performance of the site. When it comes to PDPs, that is broadly, that's fine. So the thing with this is like quite a lot of large websites, whether it's travel, job sites, e-com sites, like the mass large pages, they're typically quite templated anyway. So if you then create an AI template page, then that's obviously going to be better than a general templated PDP, which is fine. So you can do that. That's good. But typically what then happens is, what we would expect over time is that everybody starts doing that. So you essentially return back to the same level or the same means that we are right now, where everybody's got an AI generated template, which is better than the old ones. But everybody's back on the same level playing field. And then it falls back to, you just need that human optimization again, just as you would without AI. And then finally, it's the blog. So this is a big one really, is like, should you be using AI content? Should you be using AI to generate like thought leadership blogs or any kind of like top of funnel blogs? Like typically what we say is just completely avoid it if you don't have an SEO involved. So the big thing with GPT is like, it just doesn't create unique content. It'll create a piece of content which is just aggregated from the internet. And it's very easy then for GPT or Google to then read that and understand this from AI. So what we ask our clients is like, if you're going to do this, because you don't have a lot of resource, we essentially want to be the gatekeepers. because essentially the big part is that you need to get your experience across before using it. So as an example, if I would say, like, if I was going to do, like, anybody could just go into GPT and say, give me a SEO generated blog about how to rank in AI search, and it would give you something pretty decent. You could whack on the site, and someone could read it and think it was okay. But then if I did that and then put in all of my experience that's in this slide template, for example, then that is going to create a unique piece of content, which will be much better than what you could do just putting it straight into AI. So that's a big part of what you need to get across, is your experience of using your product or the service to then get AI to generate it and then proofing it afterwards. Big part of what Google does is, like, so you could create a piece of AI content and then it could rank pretty well if you have really authoritative sites. So for example, Osprey could probably do that, and it could probably get into the top 10 of Google on a generic AI content. But then Google relies massively on engagement. So if people land on that, humans typically have a good perception of if something doesn't read very well. And then, like, they've done studies where it's like AI content does have much lower engagement than standard content. So then naturally over time, the engagement will be lower, and then that piece of content will just drop from the page one of Google, essentially.
Couple of examples of brands who are doing this well. The Ordinary is a really good example of using product page information really well to get across their expertise and experience. So it's hard to see, but one feature here is, like, for this product, do not use this with these other products. That's a really nice way to get across your expertise. Like, we're saying, if you're buying this, actually don't buy these other products. They don't go, like, the ingredients don't match. Quite a nice sort of example of looking at it. And then using sort of customer experience, user generated content to show, like, what is their experience. Again, like, something that couldn't be AI generated. Another way I like to think of it is, like, AI can aggregate information. So I could ask it, what's the best restaurant in London to go to? But I could also ask Sam, like, oh, what nice restaurants have you been to? And I'd probably rate Sam's experience over a sort of aggregation of all answers across the web. So if we can get that across on site, it sets you up really nicely for AI search and also really nicely for customers as well. And we've got a few examples on the slide. Oh, sorry, Sam.
Yeah, I was going to say, just conscious of time, so there's a few that we could skim through here. There's another example with Osprey. I think that one point that this would work really well is then offsite. So a lot of journalists ask for expert opinions. So, like, for example, they could be asked for, like, expert opinions on, like, getting started with camping or going hiking. So then Osprey could use these experts offsite and on-site. So then it helps to position the brand as an authority and expertise within these topics. And then, yeah, I think, like, just skipping through some of these, I think PDPs become way more data led. So the more factual data that you can get across the PDPs, the better. I've got a few examples here of, like, Birkenstock and Pure Sport here. Very factual. Again, like, this is a good example. Like I mentioned, like, people are getting way more educated through social media now. So anything around ingredients works really well for brands like this. And then the distinct brand values. So this is referenced it previously, but, like, if LLMs and Google are aggregating everything into their platform, it's really hard to control your brand message, what you stand for, etc. So what we say to clients is, yeah, and again, if Google's controlling that, then you're going to get a lot more clicks to the deeper pages, like the PDPs. So your PDPs and these deep pages essentially have to act like a storefront for the entire website. And within there, trying to get your clear, concise message across of, like, what you want your brand to stand for, what makes it special, and then attempt to get that going externally. It's very hard to do, but if you can, like, if, for example, if a publisher says, like, Osprey, who high quality bags or whatever their distinct thing is, that gives a much bigger indication and reference to LLMs of, like, what the brand of Osprey stands for. Do you want to do this one, Dan?
Yeah. So within that, brand sentiment becomes much more important because LLMs will sort of try to match what people are searching with the sentiment across the web. So you want to make sure that sentiment across the web, well, is firstly shown on site, as Sam said, across your About Us and across product pages, but also reflected and from external places as well. So you want to lean into the good sentiment and sort of try to combat the bad sentiment unless it's a factor where actually it's the bad sentiment is not necessarily a bad thing. I think for Osprey, one of the negative sentiments was like not as trendy or something, but actually like, well, they're not built to be trendy, they're built to last and get you up mountains, so you can even sort of play to that. But making sure that the sentiment behind your brand is something you want to be matched with from an external perspective, and that matches what you're saying about yourself on site as well. Becomes a much bigger thing in AI search. I always say like there was always a bit of a joke in SEO when there was a big PR disaster for a brand. It's like, oh well, at least we've got some links from it, and it might help our rankings. Whereas that never was strictly true in SEO, but it's definitely not true in AI search, who are much more nuanced.
Cool. Yeah, that's the last slide then. So essentially, broadly speaking, if you are investing in SEO, you are basically investing in AI search. I think agencies should have a lens on this anyway, and be talking about it. And particularly if you've got an agency pitching, then they should be covering it or at least referencing it. And like we mentioned, we had one of the visuals where it showed like 80% of what we're doing still has that traditional activity going on with the AI side of things, but over time it's going to become a lot more focused towards AI. Defining the prompts at the start in line with the personas and being informed from the traditional data, best place to start. Content depth then around those prompts to tackle those situational nuances, and then the offsite activity is just super important and valuable. So it's like the brand building, link building, citation building. Like when people think about SEO, they overly focus on the on-site side of things. But it's the offsite that adds just so much more value to the trust side of things for LLMs. Cool, just about made it.
Amazing time management there, which gives us 5 minutes for questions. Eric, I don't know if you're able to come off mute, but I know you had a big question about Osprey.
So I guess the question is really around budgets and effort. So Osprey, clearly a big brand. It'd be good to understand kind of scale of, I imagine you might not be able to share budget, but just kind of scale of effort, man hours, expertise involved in that. And then kind of conversely, if you were working, if you were approached by a 5 million or 10 million pound turnover brand, what you would recommend then to get going on?
Yeah, good question. So I think the thing with, again, this is where it kind of plays into SEO, traditional SEO is like with Osprey, they've got such external authority because they're so big.
Mm-hmm.
That means that we don't really need to focus too much on that side. So we can do a lot more on-site optimizations. There's a lot more in our control. So if anything, it's slightly easier to do this for an Osprey. It's just a wider challenge of scale because we do it across all markets. Whereas if it is a smaller brand that's got less authority, then we would typically focus on the offsite side of things, get PR going, get the brand out there before going into some of the more advanced stuff. So it varies so much, but yeah, typically ballpark to get started is about 5K, and then that's like 5 days worth of time. And then that varies across, if it, like that roughly gets maybe like 2 to 3 people on the account. So so varied across different industries. But I think if your resource is low, we'd always say just focus on the offsite side of things, so PR, getting the brand out there, because that helps with this, but then it also has like those knock-on effects to all of the other channels as well.
Super, very helpful. Thank you.
No worries.
There's a question from David. David, I don't know if you're able to come off mute and share your question.
Yeah, I can do. Thank you. So I was just listening to you there on the brand sentiment piece, and often with brand measures, brand sentiment is typically just positive or negative. With brand measures, leader in the category or authority in the category, or more nuanced articulations of sentiment in the category start to matter. For this situation, is all of that not really important, and it's just simply positive, negative sentiment? Or what's the best way to think about the nuances there?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that because AI search has a much better understanding of topics, it does become more about sentiment within a topic. And so, yeah, sentiment could be really high in one category and not as high in another. And actually, Profound breaks down at a category level sentiment, so you can see that level of detail if you've defined which categories you're after. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like before, it was much more like good, bad. Actually, now it's much more about like your niche, like within that niche, what are people saying good, what are people saying bad, and that could be different across niches and categories. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Becomes much more good. I guess it's good in a lot of ways, but also can be trickier when you've got several several things to manage.
Yeah, thank you.
I have one selfish question before we wrap up. You talked a lot about myth busting at the beginning. What do you think is the biggest mistake people make when trying to optimize their brand for LLMs?
Good question. I think the biggest mistake you can do is going with some kind of agency that it just says that they're geo. I think that's an obvious one. And then if they start promising things like Dan was mentioning about manipulating Reddit, creating these landing pages that, like, if they're saying that they can get you results ASAP, and it's just a case of getting some landing pages on the site, then yeah, that's where things are just not good. And if you feel like this is not content that you really want to shout about, then yeah, those are the typical ones that we'd be focusing on.
Dan, anything to add?
Any other?
Yeah, I think the other thing we found is you can probably sort of assume from this deck is like it probably will take a lot of time and effort to actually be successful in the long run. I think everyone wants to do really well in AI search, but actually when it comes down to it, like, are they willing to invest the time, money, and effort to get there? And I think over the next few years, we'll see which brands are actually sort of investing in this area and which are sort of, because everyone wants to do well, but it is much more about understanding your customer, having that content on site, having your brand reflected in a certain way. And so I think like there's wanting to do it and then actually doing it. It becomes even harder with AI search. But I think the brands that do will see big benefit.
It's a bit like the old days of SEO, isn't it? There's all the black hat, quick wins,
Yeah.
and they're just not going to have the longevity. So, Aman, I think you just nailed it. Consistency of investment matters. Thank you so much, Sam and Dan. That was fantastic. So much to take in. So I will be sharing the recording and the deck so you can revisit much of this information. If people want to reach out to you directly or find out more about Novos, what's the best way to do that?
We're on LinkedIn, but everything we're sharing about this stuff is on our Substack. So it's like ecommerce.thisisnovos.com. And on there, we kind of say, yeah, no selling is just all about, all of our thoughts and details all around AI search. Because, yeah, it's changing a lot. And the thing that annoys us the most is how polarizing all this LinkedIn shit is. And our clients get it a lot too. Like they get a lot of grief from their boss about stuff that's on LinkedIn. So the aim of that Substack is to get past all of that and just give you basically what this presentation was, but just in a lot more depth.
Brilliant. So I will share the link to that as well in the follow-up email because it sounds like there's some really valuable insight there as well. And as Sam said, no selling on there. It's just useful insight on this very intriguing and constantly changing topic. Thank you again. And thanks everyone for joining us and hope you will have a wonderful afternoon.